Badu's anger seemed to have no limit. What began as coldness towards his wife and child soon spilled over into his interactions with Kofi. Every time they met in the village or at gatherings, Badu would give Kofi harsh looks or make snide comments, leaving Kofi confused and frustrated. He couldn't understand what had changed in Badu. After all, this entire situation had been Badu's idea. Why was he now treating him as if he were the enemy? One day, Kofi couldn't take it anymore. He went to Badu's house, determined to confront him. As he approached, he saw Badu sitting outside, staring at nothing in particular, his face twisted in anger. Kofi called his name, and Badu barely acknowledged him, only grunting in response. "We need to talk, Badu," Kofi said firmly, standing before him. "What is going on? Why are you treating me like this?" Badu's eyes flashed with hostility as he stood up, towering over Kofi. "You really have the nerve to ask me that, after what you have done?" Kofi was taken aback. "What have I done? You begged me, Badu. You practically dragged me into this mess. Don't you dare try to blame me for your problems." Badu's face reddened with anger. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low growl. "You slept with my wife, Kofi. How do you expect me to just forget that? You think you are innocent in all of this?" Kofi clenched his fist, trying to keep his voice steady. "I slept with her because you forced me to. I didn't want to do it. You begged me, Badu. You told me it was the only way to save your marriage. I thought I was helping a friend." "Helping me? You have destroyed everything. My life is ruined. My marriage is in pieces. And I can't even look at my own child without feeling sick. And you want to tell me you did this for me?" Kofi shook his head in disbelief. "This is unbelievable. You are the one who set this whole thing in motion. You made your wife and me suffer for your pride. And now you want to blame me?" The tension between the two men was thick, their words filled with bitterness. Neither of them noticed the figure lurking just out of sight behind a large tree, not far from where they were arguing. Ifeoma, the village gossip, had been passing by when she heard raised voices. Being who she was, her curiosity got the better of her, and she quickly hid behind the tree to eavesdrop. Her eyes widened as she heard the shocking conversation unfold. Ama's pregnancy wasn't the miracle everyone in the village thought it was. It was Kofi, Badu's best friend, who had fathered the child. Ifeoma could barely contain her excitement. This was the kind of scandal that could set the whole village ablaze with gossip, and she would be the one to spread it. Meanwhile, Kofi, still unaware that they were being overheard, tried to reason with Badu one last time. "Badu, I did what you asked me to do, and now you're turning on me as if this was all my idea. If you want to fix things, you need to stop blaming me and face the truth. This is your doing." Badu's rage only deepened. His voice grew louder, more dangerous. "I will tell your wife, Kofi. I will tell her that you slept with Ama, my wife. Let's see how you like living in shame when everyone knows what you have done." Kofi's eyes widened with shock. "You wouldn't dare, Badu." "Oh, I would," Badu sneered. "You think you can just walk away from this? If I'm going to suffer, then you are going down with me." Kofi felt his heart pounding in his chest. But before he could respond, Ifeoma, unable to contain herself any longer, darted from behind the tree and ran towards the village center. Her face lit up with excitement. She was going to share what she had overheard with as many people as she could find. By the time Kofi realized what had happened, it was too late. He caught a glimpse of Ifeoma disappearing down the path, and his stomach dropped. "Oh no, Badu! Do you know what you have done?" Badu turned, his anger momentarily replaced with confusion. "What are you talking about?" he asked. Ifeoma was listening. She heard everything. Kofi's voice was filled with dread. "She's going to tell the whole village. Everyone will know." Badu's face paled as the weight of Kofi's words sank in. Ifeoma was notorious for spreading gossip like wildfire. It was only a matter of time before the entire village knew the truth. Badu's pride, the very thing he had been trying to protect, was about to crumble in the most public way possible. That night, under the cover of darkness, Badu made his way to Ifeoma's home. His heart raced, not from fear, but from a desperate determination. He knew that if the truth came out, his reputation would be ruined, his wealth and pride shattered. He couldn't let that happen. He had to act fast. And Ifeoma was the way to controlling the story. As Badu approached Ifeoma's small hut, the shadows of the three danced in the moonlight. He knocked on her door, his mind racing with the plan he had concocted. When Ifeoma opened the door and saw Badu standing there, his eyes lit up with curiosity. She knew this was going to be interesting. "What brings you here at this hour, Badu?" she asked, leaning against the door frame, a sly smile creeping onto her face. Badu forced a grin, trying to mask his desperation. "Ifeoma, I know you heard some things today, but let's not be hasty about what you spread. There is more to the story, and I am here to offer you something in return for your help." Ifeoma raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh, and what exactly would you need my help with, Badu?" Badu glanced around to make sure no one was watching. Then he pulled a small pouch from his tunic. He opened it, revealing a handful of shining gold coins. Ifeoma's eyes widened at the sight. "I need you to change the story," Badu whispered, his voice low and urgent. "You will tell the villagers that Ama, my wife, cheated on me with Kofi. Spread the word that I am the victim in all of this." Ifeoma's smile grew wider and she chuckled softly. "So you want me to make it look like you are the one who was wronged, right?" Badu nodded his head, the weight of the situation pressing on him. "Yes, and these coins will be yours if you do so." Without hesitation, Ifeoma snatched the pouch from his hand, her fingers tracing the edges of the coins as if savoring her new fortune. "Consider it done," she said. "Tomorrow, the village will know a new version of the story." "Thank you, Ifeoma. I knew I could count on you." As he left her house and disappeared into the night, Badu allowed himself to believe for just a moment that his problem was solved. He had bought Ifeoma's loyalty, and with her sharp tongue and quick gossiping, she would shape the story in his favor. The next morning, Ifeoma wasted no time. She started very early, making her rounds to every corner of the village. With the gold coins jingling in her pockets, she began her performance. "You won't believe what I heard," she said with wide eyes, her voice filled with mock shock. "I heard that Ama has been sneaking around behind Badu's back. Can you imagine? She's been seeing Kofi in secret, betraying her own husband like that." The villagers gossip in disbelief. Ama, the quiet, respectful wife of Badu, involved in an affair? It was too scandalous not to spread. Ifoma had a way of making her story so juicy that no one could resist listening. They said Badu find out, Ifoma continued, lowering her voice for dramatic effect. And that's why things has been so tense between him and Kofi. Poor Badu, he has been suffering in silence, trying to protect his family's honor. As Ifoma's words spread like wildfire, the entire village was buzzing with fabricated story. Everywhere Amma went, she could feel the eyes of the villagers on her, their whispers chasing her like a shadow. They looked at her not with pity or respect they once had, but with suspicion and judgment. At the market, women gathered in small groups whispering, "Did you hear about Amma? Can you believe she would betray Badu like that?" Men exchanged knowing glances and shook their heads, muttering, "I always thought something was off about her. Poor Badu, after everything he has done for her." The story grew legs, and with each retelling, the details became more exaggerated. Soon, the villagers were convinced that Amma had been the one at fault, sneaking around behind Badu's back with Kofi, her husband's best friend. Meanwhile, Kofi also began feeling the weight of the lies. People in the village started treating him differently. Men who had once greeted him warmly now barely acknowledged him. His wife noticed the shift too, but she hadn't yet heard the full extent of the rumor. Kofi knew it was only a matter of time before the truth, or rather, Badu's version of the truth, reached her ears. As the day wore on, Amma found herself more isolated than ever. She had no idea why the villagers were turning against her, why their gaze had suddenly become so cold and judgmental. And Badu, instead of standing by her as a loving husband, kept his distance, watching as the lie he had spun began to take root. But deep down, Amma knew something was wrong. She could feel it in the way Badu looked at her now, with an odd mixture of triumph and disgust. She didn't yet know what Ifoma had been telling the village, but soon the weight of the lies would come crashing down on her, threatening to destroy everything. The sun hung high in the sky as Amma sat inside her hut, lost in thought. For days she had felt the weight of cold stares from the villagers, the whispers behind her back, growing louder with every passing moment. Suddenly, a loud commotion erupted outside. Amma stood up, startled, and peered out the window. Her heart sank. A large group of women from the village, their faces filled with fury and righteous indignation, were marching towards her hut, their shouts piercing the air, and one word kept echoing louder than the rest: abomination, abomination. Before she could even react, the women stormed into her hut, their anger palpable. Amma tried to speak, to ask what was going on, but they wouldn't let her get a word in. "How dare you?" one of the women shouted, pointing an accusing finger at her. "How could you betray your husband like this? A married woman committing such a vile act." Amma's eyes widened in shock. What? What are you talking about? I haven't done anything." But the women could not listen. They had already made up their minds. The rumors have poisoned their hearts. They began tearing through her hut, grabbing her belongings and throwing them outside. "Get out!" they shouted, their voice harsh and unyielding. "You have disgraced yourself and your family and this village. You don't belong here anymore." Amma's heart raced as she looked around, panicking. She turned towards Badu, who sat silently in the corner, watching everything unfold. Tears welled up in her eyes as she called out to her husband, her voice breaking. "Badu, please say something. Let them know the truth, please." But Badu remained unmoved, his face a mask of indifference. He didn't lift a finger to defend her, didn't say a single word. His silence was deafening. The women grabbed Amma roughly, pulling her outside as they continued to shout at her, "Adulteress! You don't deserve to stay here. Go back to your father's house where you belong." Amma stumbled, trying to plead with them, but they wouldn't listen, tears streaming down her face as they dragged her out of the village. Her belongings carelessly thrown on the ground behind her. As they forced her out, some of the women began sweeping her footsteps, a traditional act meant to cleanse the village of her sin and erase her presence from her husband's life. Amma's cries echoed through the village, but no one came to her aid. She wept bitterly, feeling utterly betrayed by the man who was supposed to protect her. Badu's cold indifference cut deeper than the harsh words of the village women. As she walked away, her heart broke with every step, knowing that she was being cast out without even the chance to defend herself. As she made her way to her father's hut, her mind raced. How had everything gone so wrong? She had done nothing but obey her husband's impossible demands, and now she was being punished for it. She couldn't help but wonder if Kofi's wife have heard the lies too. The thought sent another wave of sorrow crashing over her. Back in the village, Kofi was facing his own storm. His wife had heard the rumors, and when she confronted him about it, Kofi's words began to unravel. "How could you?" she shouted, tears streaming down her face. "How could you betray me like this? I thought you were a good man, Kofi. I trusted you." Kofi tried to explain, but how could he? His guilt weighed heavily on him, and the look of devastation on his wife's face nearly broke him. "You have destroyed our marriage, Kofi," she cried. "I don't even know who you are anymore." As the village buzzed with scandal, both Amma and Kofi found themselves trapped in a web of lies and betrayal, unsure of how they would ever escape. The once respected Badu watched silently, his pride intact, but his soul darkened by the cruel choices he had made. After the village had chased Amma back to her father's house, life became unbearable for her. Every day she was met with cold stares and whispers from the village, their judgment heavy and suffocating. She couldn't even walk through the village without hearing someone mutter shame she had brought upon herself. It was as if the entire village had turned their backs on her, and the weight of their disdain was crushing. Amma spent countless nights weeping in her small room, her heart broken by Badu's betrayal. She regretted ever letting herself to be manipulated by her husband, regretted the day she agreed to his outrageous demands. Her son was the only light in her life, and Amma's mother took care of him while Amma tried to find some peace. Amma told her parents everything that had happened in her marriage, how Badu had no manhood, how he had forced her into an unspeakable situation, and how he had abandoned her when she needed him most. Her parents listened, their hearts heavy with sorrow. They knew they could do little against Badu, not because he was right, but because his wealth shielded him from consequences. In their village, wealth and status often meant more than justice, and Badu's riches made him untouchable. Her father, though angry, knew that challenging Badu would be a fruitless battle. As the days passed, Amma endured the pain in silence. Meanwhile, Ifoma, the village gossip who had once gleefully spread lies about her, began to see the consequences of her actions. She watched from afar as Amma suffered, and for the first time in her life, Ifoma felt guilt gnawing at her. She had twisted the truth for a handful of gold coins, and now she was seeing the damage her lies had caused. Every time she saw Amma, her heart ached with regret. Eventually, Ifeoma couldn't take it anymore. She had to do something to make it right. She decided to confess the truth to the village elders, the only people who could change the narrative and offer Amma a chance to justice. Ifeoma knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to do the right thing. At the same time, Kofi's life had been turned upside down. His marriage was on the brink of collapse, and the guilt weighed heavily on him. He realized that the only way to salvage his life and his family was to tell the truth. And if it meant exposing Badu's terrible secrets, he could no longer live with the lies. One fateful day, the village elders gathered for their usual meetings. It was a day like any other day, until Kofi arrived, followed closely by Ifeoma. Kofi stood before the elders, his face tense, his voice heavy with emotion as he revealed the entire story. He told them how Badu had manipulated him into sleeping with Amma to produce an heir, how the rumors of Amma's infidelity were lies, and how Badu had no manhood. The elders sat in stone silence as Kofi laid bare the truth. Badu, who was present at the meeting, immediately denied everything. His face twisted in desperation as he tried to deny the accusation. "It's all lies," he shouted. "They are trying to ruin me. Kofi is bitter, and Amma, she's just trying to shame me because I didn't give her everything she wanted." But Ifeoma stepped forward, her voice trembling with guilt. "I can't stay silent anymore. I spread the rumors, but they were lies. Badu paid me to twist the truth. It was all his doings." The elders were taken aback, their expressions grim. As the weight of the revelation sank in, they immediately summoned Amma to the gathering. When Amma arrived, she faced the elders with her head held high. Even though her heart was pounding in her chest, she recounted everything that had happened in her marriage, how Badu had no manhood, how he had coerced her into an unbearable situation, and how he had turned the village against her. The elders were shocked beyond words, but Amma didn't stop there. "If you don't believe me, any one of you can check him yourself," she said boldly. The room fell into a stone silence as the truth lay bare before them. With Ifeoma's confession and Amma's testimony, Badu's lies crumbled. Realizing there was no way out, Badu finally broke down and began apologizing, begging for forgiveness. "I am sorry. I didn't mean it for it to go this way or this far. Please forgive me," he cried, his voice desperate. But the elders were not moved by his pleas. They turned to one another, and after a long, heavy silence, they made a decision that would change the village forever. They decreed that the law forbidding women from leaving their husband's home, no matter the circumstances, was unjust. The elders recognized that men had been taking advantage of this law far too long, treating their wives poorly with no fear of consequences. From that day on, they declare any woman who was being mistreated in her marriage would have the right to leave. Abuse, they say, was no longer something a woman had to endure in silence. With the new law in place, Amma stood tall and immediately declared in front of everyone, "I no longer wish to be married to Badu." Despite Badu's tearful pleas and desperate apologies, the bride price he had paid for Amma was returned to him, marking the official end of their marriage. Amma returns to her father's home with her son, free from Badu's manipulations and cruelty. Over time, she found happiness again. She eventually remarried a kind man who treated her with the love and respect she deserved. And she lived a peaceful life, raising her children in joy and harmony. As for Kofi, he reconciled with his wife after the truth came out. Though it took time to heal the wounds caused by the situation, they eventually found peace in their marriage, and Kofi lived happily with his family. But Badu, his secret was now known by the entire village, and no woman wanted to marry him. He lived the rest of his life alone, haunted by the consequences of his actions and the pride that had once ruled him. The village had moved on, but Badu remained trapped in the wreckage of the lies he had built. And so, the village learned a valuable lesson. No amount of wealth or status could shield a person from the truth, and no one should be forced to suffer in silence in marriage.